As a case manager who works in the community out in the field, one of the things that I have to be mindful of is personal safety. There are some environments that I can drive into and I'll drive in and just do an about face and drive right back out because the environment doesn't feel safe when I'm there. And so this is just something that all case managers, those that work in the field, have to think about, have to deal with. Now, those who work in clinical environments like hospitals, nursing homes, and whatnot, they have their own issues that they have to deal with regard to personal safety. Now, my name is Stephen Cook, and this is a series of short little videos I'm doing on field notes from a Christian case manager. And so it's me taking the Word of God and applying it to aspects of my work. And as a case manager who works in the community, I want to be able to take the Word of God and apply it. Now, as a field caseworker, I go out and I have to bring services to the clients who live in their homes and apartment complexes. Some of the neighborhoods that I go into are very impoverished, and some, unfortunately, have a high crime rate. And so you just have to be mindful. Some of the neighborhoods that I go into at one time when the client bought the home, maybe 50 years ago, was a nice neighborhood. But the neighborhood went into decline. The client lived there. They aged into place. And what was once their palace is now their prison. And they can't get out, so we have to bring services and resources to them. But the world is not a safe place. And so we have to be mindful about the environments that we walk into. Now, there are two passages of Scripture that to me speak on this issue with regard to personal safety and even self-defense. One is in Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 17 and 18, which says, "Those who were rebuilding the wall and those who carried burdens took their load with one hand doing the work and the other holding a weapon, a sword. As for the builders, each wore his sword girded at his side as he built, while the trumpeter stood near me." Now, this just gives an example of somebody who's doing work, but at the same time, they're mindful of the dangers around them. And they are personally armed for self-defense. Now, I carry pepper spray. I carry a little taser with me. I've got a pocket knife. I do have a license to carry a firearm. And so I have layers of protection that I have in place. Of course, the greatest form of protection is just my situational awareness. And if I can avoid something and drive away, walk away, get away by any means, I'll do that. And there are some situations where I've driven into an apartment complex, looked like there was some gang violence about to go down, and I just put it in reverse and backed up. I've had people approach me, trying to game me, trying to get money out of me. I've had people try to sell me drugs. It's like, thanks, but no thanks. Don't need what you got, you know. And in those moments, you just have to, again, use your wit, stay aware, and just drive away or walk away. Now, the other passage is in Luke 22:36, where Jesus said to them, and this would be after his resurrection, he said, "But now whoever has a money belt is to take it along." Now, context, previously Jesus had provided for and protected those who were under his care, those who were his traveling companions, the apostles. But now he's going to leave them. He's going to ascend bodily to heaven. And so it's in that context that he's leaving them that he said to them, he says, "Whoever has a money belt is to take it along, likewise also a bag, and whoever has no sword is to sell his cloak and buy one." And so this means that they were to carry personal self-defense when they were going about doing ministry. Now, listen, as Christians, we are to be as innocent as doves, but wise as serpents. And so we live in a fallen world, and we want to be aware, we want to be shrewd about the environment, and we want to conduct ourselves with wisdom, innocently but wisely. Now, I can think of situations where I've gone into, again, apartment complex, neighborhoods, Sometimes going into an environment means taking a companion with me, traveling in pairs. In fact, a few years ago, I had a young lady who was going out to visit somebody for a first-time visit to get them signed up for services and resources. And she said, I know this neighborhood, I know this street, and I think I know this complex that we're going to go into, and I would feel comfortable if somebody was with me. And so she asked if I would ride along, which I did. So we got out to this place, and it was pretty rough. And I was on high alert, very mindful. Now, you always want to keep composure. You always want to be respectful, be diplomatic, be kind, be intentional. There's times where I will try to collect a lot of information over the phone when I'm talking with a client, so that when I get out to the home, it allows for a shorter visit. It can expedite services in the home if I collected most of what I needed over the phone. So there are certain techniques, things that you can do, again, to limit your time when you go into difficult neighborhoods. But we went out to this client's home, got into his place, and we had to walk through two groups of people. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know if they were selling drugs. I don't know if it was gang activity. I don't know. But when I walk up, I introduce myself. I say I'm with this nonprofit. We're here to provide services. I'm, going to visit so-and-so. I'll maybe show a badge just to kind of let them know. I've also learned to be aggressively kind. When I walk in, people will sometimes question you. They look at you with a furrowed brow, like, who are you, friend or foe? Because people are checking you out. They don't know. I heard somebody a few years ago, a lecturer, psychiatrist, and he was talking about the political climate that we have here in America. And he was talking about the hostility that exists. And he said it's just kind of created this culture where a lot of people, when they're looking at you, one of the first questions they ask themselves, not that they necessarily articulate it this way, but he said often many people, when they meet somebody new, one of the first questions they ask themselves is, are you safe? Now, they may ask follow-up questions like, are you competent? Are you caring? Whatever else. But they want to know that you're safe. And so when I walk in and I meet somebody, and let's say there's a question mark and I don't know who they are, I'll generally greet them. I'll say, hi, my name's Steve, here to help. Hope your day's going fine. I'll just greet people as I'm walking through. And I do this in my neighborhood as well. If I have a new neighbor, I'll greet them and introduce myself. But it's just that intentional kindness. And what I've learned is that in many situations that will diffuse a question mark that somebody may have about you, because I'm not neutral. And so when I come in, I can let them know, hey, look, I'm not a threat, okay? Now, I also carry myself well. I try to stand with square shoulders. I try to look people in the eye. I try to be direct. I'm not distracted. I'm not looking on my phone. I'm not holding papers up and looking around with a questioning look. I'm walking with an air of, I'll use the word authority. I'm walking with intentionality. I'm looking around, and how you carry yourself matters. I remember some years ago I was watching some videos, and I don't even remember who did it, if it was on YouTube or if it was on television, but this interview was interviewing these two guys who had been criminals. They had been thieves, muggers, pickpockets in New York. And they were showing them videos, and they said, well, who would you look at as a target? And they showed this one woman who was walking round-shouldered, had her phone in her hand, was looking around, very distracted, had her bag hanging loosely on her arm. And they said, she's a soft target. She's distracted. She doesn't look like she could defend herself. We could easily come up and grab the bag and be gone, and she wouldn't even know what hit her. Or it would take her a minute to figure it out. But then there was another woman, there was another guy, the two other people they showed walking, had their phone on their hip, walking, carrying themselves straight, not necessarily physically built, but they both said hard target because they saw them as people who were situationally aware, not approached. The criminals would have a harder time approaching them unaware. And they look like they might throw up some resistance. And so again, they viewed these people as being hard targets. Now, that tells you how some people's minds think. And people think in terms of risk versus reward. And even criminals have the risk versus reward mentality, and if the risk goes up, well, the reward goes down in proportion. And so, again, they think that way. So you want to capitalize on that. You want to be very intentional. Again, I would say be kind, be diplomatic, but be aware of your environment, carry yourself well. And there was one time where I had gone out to visit with a client, and he was in his mid-40s, big guy, 6'5", 280 pounds, pretty strong guy. He was dealing with a moderate schizophrenia. Generally, he wasn't an issue. Whenever I'd go out and visit with him, I'd meet him at his door. I wouldn't go into his apartment, but there were a few times that I did. But when I went into his apartment on this one occasion, he was really having a very difficult day. And I remember he kept tapping his head. He kept tapping his head. And he used to do this on occasion. And one time he even told me, he asked me, he said, "Do you know why I do that?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, it's to quiet the other voices so that I can focus on you." And I said, "Okay, if that's what works for you." But I got into his little apartment, and we sat at his little round table near his kitchen, and it was a tiny little apartment, maybe 700-800 square feet. And I remember when I was talking with him, he seemed a little agitated, and finally he jumps up from the table and he's pointing at the floor in the kitchen. He goes, "There it is again, there it is again. I've cleaned that up 3 times today, and there's that blood on the floor again." Well, he was having an active hallucination, and he was obviously irritated. And at that point, I'm thinking, where's the door? Okay. And I'm not really concerned with how it concerns, how it looks for me. And I stood up with him, and I just said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm going to catch you another day. I'm going to let myself out." And I just turned around and walked for the door. And I left. And there was no incident there. But that was one of those moments where when I go in, I always want to be aware of my environment. I want to be aware of what's going on. Now, when I go into homes, sometimes I go into homes where, especially dealing with some older people or some guys or gals that are ex-military, they got firearms around. I had a guy that I went in and saw. He was paralyzed at the waist and at the hips, but he had a firearm. He had a Glock 27 9mm attached on his wheelchair. He had it attached on there, but I always felt comfortable in his presence. Now, I grew up in a military family. My father was in the military. 4 of my family's members were in the military. I used to go hunting with my dad when I was a kid in Southern California. So I grew up with firearms, so they don't bother me. And I was taught gun safety as a young age by my father, and so it doesn't bother me. So when I go into homes and I see a shotgun on the wall or a rifle in the corner, I'm not put off by that. But at the same time, I'm aware of what I'm walking into. And I always want to be aware of my environment. And I want to know where the doors are, just in case. And, fortune favors the prepared, so to say. You always want to be mindful about these sorts of things. So I'm aware of when I go into neighborhoods. I had a client some years ago, and the neighbor, the house next to her had been condemned and was boarded up. Well, some people in the neighborhood came in and occupied this home that had been abandoned, and it was basically a drug house. And we had difficulty getting some of our staff out there because they didn't feel safe. One time I had a coworker, she went to an apartment complex, a really, really rough place, and some guy approached her. She was getting out of her car, and some guy came running up to her and, was trying to sell her some heroin. And anyway, when she turned around, here's this guy, he's in her face, and he's real loud and animated, and anyway, she froze. But she had enough presence of mind about her that she kept her hand near her hip where she had some pepper spray, and she was able to tell the guy, I think it took her 2 or 3 times, where she just told him, "Look, I don't want what you have." And then when he turned around, man, she got in her car. I mean, she jumped in, locked the doors, put it in, started the car, put it in reverse, got out. And it's one of those things where you may be approached and you have to keep your composure. But when going back to that apartment complex, she took somebody with her because there's safety in numbers. So there's things that you can do when you're out and about. And just one, realize the world isn't always a safe place. And some of the neighborhoods that you drive into as a case manager, even though you're out there doing good and you're being good and you're trying to connect them with services and resources to improve the quality of their life because you care, because you want to affect change, because you want to make a difference, the reality is we live in a fallen world. And whether you're those rebuilding the wall, like was the case with Nehemiah and the Israelites in Nehemiah 4, or whether you're like those whom Jesus spoke to as the apostles, that you're going out and you're doing ministry. Hello, ministry. You're helping other people, but at the same time, you need to have a way to defend yourself. And self-defense is a legitimate and a biblical teaching. And I've actually written on this. I have an article I published some years ago on self-defense being a biblical concept. And you find it all the way throughout the scriptures, that it is absolutely justified. So anyway, just be mindful about your environment. Take measures to keep yourself safe. Be situationally aware. And employ good tactics. Go in numbers if you need to as a case manager, just, in life in general. And have the means to defend yourself if needed, whether with the use of your hands. I used to train in martial arts for several years, fought in Taekwondo for a couple years till I got injured, and then I was out of work for a few weeks, and I thought, well, I can't keep doing this because I was living paycheck to paycheck. But you learn how to defend yourself. You learn how to handle yourself in a situation. And if you need to carry pepper spray, if you need to carry a pocket knife, if you need to carry a taser or a stun gun, or if you even need to carry a firearm, we live in America, Second Amendment right, and if it's your legal right to do so, then by all means, carry whatever protection makes you feel safe. But always be situationally aware and be ready to get out because that's always the best option. So anyway, safety is very important as a case manager, as a Christian case manager working in the community. I know I've kind of run a little bit long on this one, but I hope that this has been informative and helpful to you. And I thank you very much, and I wish you a blessed day.